Jake Mitchell pushed through the crowded auction hall on station Omega 7, his worn boots squeaking on the metal floor. The place smelled like oil and desperation, packed with traders and salvagers, all looking for their next big score. Jake had exactly 2,000 credits his account, and needed a ship badly. His last vessel had blown a fusion core 3 weeks ago, leaving him stranded and broke. The auctioneer's voice boomed to a crowd as lot after lot of military surplus went for prices Jake could never afford. Sleek fighters sold for 50,000 credits. Heavy cruisers went for millions. Jake watched his dreams slip away with each hammer fall. Then came Lot 847B, former military transport. The auctioneer announced with less enthusiasm than he'd shown for a broken scanner. Served in the Terran Centauri War. Some complications included. Do I hear 5,000? The crowd barely looked up. Jake studied the grainy hollow display, showing a beat-up cargo hauler, with scorch marks along its hull. It looked like it had been through hell, but the engine seemed intact. Most importantly, nobody else seemed interested. 1,000, Jake called out, his voice cracking slightly. 1,000 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 1,500? Silence filled the hall. Jake held his breath. Sold a bidder 347 for 1,000 credits. Jake couldn't believe it. He'd just bought a starship for half his savings. There had to be a catch. But right now he didn't care. He made his way to the payment station, hands shaking as he transferred the credits. An hour later, Jake stood in docking bay 12 staring at his new ship, the Lucky Strike, according to the registration documents. Up close, she looked better than expected. The hull damage was mostly cosmetic, and the engines appeared to be in working order. Jake activated his new access codes and walked up the boarding ramp. The interior surprised him even more. Clean corridors with functioning lights, a decent-sized cargo bay, and what looked like a fully equipped medical bay. This ship was worth at least 10 times what he'd paid for it. His excitement grew as he explored each room. Jake made his way to the bridge and settled into the captain's chair. The control panels lit up at his touch, systems coming online with pleasant hums and beeps. He was about to run a full diagnostic when a cheerful voice filled the air. Welcome aboard the Lucky Strike, Captain Mitchell. I am the ship's artificial intelligence. You may call me Lucky. Jake jumped in his seat. AI? This thing has a full AI system. Indeed, Captain. I have been waiting for a new commanding officer. Might I suggest you visit the medical bay? There's something you should know about your purchase. Jake's good mood faltered. What kind of something? It would be better if you saw for yourself, Captain. Bay 3, down the corridor and to your left. Jake stood slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe there was a body in there, or some kind of medical emergency. He walked down the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet ship. Medical Bay 3 was larger than he'd expected, filled with advanced equipment he'd only seen in high-end hospitals. But what caught his attention was a large biostasis pod in the center of the room, its surface glowing with a soft blue light. Jake approached carefully and peered through the transparent aluminum window. Inside lay a woman, or at least something that looked like a woman. Her skin had a slight blue tint, and her hair was silver white, flowing around her peaceful face like liquid mercury. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Lucky, what is this? That is Nira, Captain. She is your wife. Jake's legs gave out, and he grabbed the nearest chair. My what? According to Viridian marriage law, which is legally binding in this sector, Nira became bound to whoever purchased this vessel. The previous captain, Captain Rodriguez, entered into the arrangement during a diplomatic incident 6 months ago. Unfortunately, Captain Rodriguez died of a heart attack before the union could be dissolved. Jake stared at the sleeping alien woman. So you're telling me I just bought a wife? Technically, you bought the ship. Nira came with it, as specified in the marriage contract. I should mention that abandoning a Viridian spouse is considered an act of war by the Viridian Collective. Act of war? Jake's voice rose an octave. The Viridians take marriage contracts very seriously, Captain. However, there are benefits to the arrangement. Nira possesses advanced technical knowledge, and this ship is equipped with Viridian technology that will serve you well. Jake looked around the medical bay with new eyes. The equipment wasn't just advanced. It was beyond anything humans had developed. No wonder the ship had sold so cheaply. The previous owner had died, leaving behind a complicated situation nobody wanted to deal with. How long has she been in there? 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, Captain. The biostasis system has kept her in perfect health. She can be awakened at any time. Jake ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. He'd come to the auction looking for a simple cargo hauler and ended up with an alien wife and a ship full of technology he didn't understand. Part of him wanted to run. But where could he go? He'd spent half his money on this mess. Lucky, what exactly did I just get myself into? An adventure, Captain Mitchell. Quite possibly the greatest adventure of your life. Jake spent 2 days pacing around the biostasis pod before finally asking Lucky to wake Nira up. The AI had warned him that Viridians could be difficult when they first awakened, but Jake figured he couldn't avoid the situation forever. He stood next to the pod as the blue glow faded and the lid slowly opened with a soft hiss. Nira's silver eyes snapped open immediately, and she sat up with fluid grace that made Jake take a step back. She looked around the medical bay with quick, precise movements, taking in every detail. When her gaze finally settled on Jake, her expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like anger. "You are not Captain Rodriguez," she said in perfect English, though her voice carried a musical quality Jake had never heard before. "Rodriguez died 3 months ago. I bought the ship at auction. My name is Jake Mitchell." Nira stood up from the pod, and Jake noticed she was nearly as tall as he was. She wore a simple white garment that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. "I am bound to you now," she said, and Jake could hear disgust in her voice. "A human male I have never met. Look, I didn't know about any marriage contract when I bought this ship. Maybe we can figure out a way to undo this whole thing." Nira's laugh was cold and sharp. "Viridian marriage bonds cannot be simply undone, human. The contract requires either mutual consent after a full year together, or the death of one partner. Since I refuse to give consent, and I assume you will not volunteer to die, we are bound together." Jake felt his temper rising. "Listen, lady, I didn't ask for this either. I just wanted a ship to haul cargo, not an alien wife who acts like I'm some kind of disease. My people have studied humans extensively. You are violent, illogical creatures who make decisions based on emotion rather than reason. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is chaotic, and your lifespans are embarrassingly short." "Well, your people sound like a real barrel of laughs, too," Jake shot back. "Maybe that's why Rodriguez died a heart attack, having to deal with this attitude." Nira's eyes flashed, but before she could respond, Lucky's voice filled the medical bay. "Captain Mitchell, we are receiving a distress signal from the agricultural colony on Haven Prime. They report attack by unknown vessels." Jake immediately headed for the bridge, and after a moment's hesitation, Nira followed. The main screen showed a star chart with Haven Prime marked in red. Jake had delivered supplies there twice before and knew the colony housed about 3,000 farmers and their families. "Lucky, show me what we're dealing with." The screen shifted to show long-range sensor data. 5 ships surrounded the small planet, their configuration unlike anything in Jake's military database. They were firing on the surface settlements, and several buildings were already burning. "Those are Krex Syndicate raiders," Nira said, studying the display. "They raid agricultural worlds for slaves and food supplies." Jake was already plotting a course to Haven Prime. "How many people live down there?" "The colony has approximately 3,000 inhabitants," Lucky replied. "And we're 1 ship against 5 raiders," Nira pointed out. "The logical course of action is to report this to the nearest military base and continue on our way." Jake's hands moved across the control panel, bringing the ship's weapons online. "The nearest base is 4 hours away. Those people will be dead or enslaved by then. So you would risk both our lives for strangers? This is exactly the kind of emotional decision-making that proves human inferiority." "Maybe," Jake said as a Lucky strike jumped to hyperspace. "But those are good people down there. They grow food for half the sector and never hurt anybody. I'm not going to run away while they get slaughtered." The hyperspace journey to Haven Prime took 30 minutes. When they dropped back into normal space, the situation looked even worse. Two of the colony's main settlements were burning, and Jake could see small ships moving between the surface and the raiders, loaded with captured colonists. Lucky, what kind of weapons do we have? The ship is equipped with standard plasma cannons and torpedo tubes. However, Captain, we also have Viridian enhancement systems that could prove useful. Nira looked surprised. This ship has military-grade Viridian technology? Indeed, cloaking device, quantum jump capability, and adaptive weapon systems. Captain Rodriguez was involved in several classified operations before his death. Jake grinned for the first time since buying the ship. Show me how to use them. I cannot teach you Viridian systems, Nira said firmly. They are too advanced for human understanding. Then you'll have to help me, Jake replied, his eyes fixed on the burning colony below. Unless you want to watch innocent people die while we argue about it. Nira stared at him for a long moment. Jake could see her internal struggle, but finally she moved to the weapons console. Very well, but do exactly as I say, and do not ask questions about how the technology works. Deal. The Lucky Strike shimmered and vanished in the Raider's sensors as Nira activated the cloaking device. Jake had never seen anything like it. They moved through space like a ghost, approaching the enemy ships without being detected. Target the lead vessel's engines, Nira instructed. The quantum torpedoes would disable them without destroying the ship entirely. Jake fired, and the lead raider immediately began spinning out of control, its engines dark. The other four ships scrambled to find their invisible attacker, firing wildly in all directions. Jump behind the second ship, Nira said, her fingers dancing over controls Jake didn't recognize. The Lucky Strike instantly appeared behind another raider, so close Jake could see the alien crew through their bridge windows. Two more quantum torpedoes sent that ship tumbling through space, powerless. Within 10 minutes, all 5 raider ships were disabled and drifting helplessly. Jake opened a communication channel to the colony and confirmed that the captured colonists were being rescued by local security forces. As they moved away from Haven Prime, Jake noticed Nira staring at him with a different expression than before. The contempt was gone, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. You risked everything for people you barely knew, she said quietly. That's what decent people do. Viridians would have calculated the odds and chosen a logical path. Sometimes a logical path isn't the right path. Nira was silent for a long moment. Perhaps there are things about humans that our studies did not reveal. Word of the Haven Prime rescue spread quickly through the trading networks. Within a week, Jake found himself fielding offers from the Galactic Trade Federation and several major shipping companies. The credits they offered were more than Jake had ever seen, but something about their corporate attitudes rubbed him the wrong way. Instead, he took contracts helping smaller colonies and independent traders who needed protection or cargo runs to dangerous areas. Nira watched all of this with growing fascination. She had expected Jake to jump at the highest-paying offers like any logical being would, but instead he chose jobs that paid less but helped more people. When she asked him about it, Jake just shrugged and said he liked sleeping well at night. Their relationship began to change during the long hyperspace jumps between jobs. Nira started teaching Jake about the ship's advanced systems, though she was careful not to reveal too much about Viridian technology. Jake surprised her by picking up concepts quickly and finding creative ways to use equipment that impressed even her analytical mind. Your fusion drive is running at 60% efficiency, Nira observed one morning as Jake worked in the engine room. Yeah, the power coupling is worn out. Can't afford a new one right now. Jake disappeared under the console and emerged with a collection of spare parts that looked like junk. Within 2 hours, he had jury-rigged a replacement using components from 3 different systems. When he fired up the engines, they ran smoother than they had since Nira had been awake. That should not work, Nira said, staring at Jake's improvised repair. But it does work, Jake replied, wiping grease from his hands. Sometimes the best solution isn't the one in the manual. Nira ran diagnostics on the repair 3 times, unable to understand how Jake's illogical approach had produced superior results. Her people would have ordered the correct part and waited weeks for delivery, accepting the reduced efficiency as inevitable. Jake had simply refused to accept that limitation. Their next job took them to Frontier Station, a mining outpost on the edge of civilized space. The station manager had hired them to transport medical supplies to a research facility in an asteroid belt. It should have been a simple run, but nothing was ever simple in Jake's life. Halfway through the asteroid field, the ship's navigation computer failed completely. Nira immediately began calculating a safe path out using the ship's sensors and mathematical projections, but Jake did something that made her question everything she thought she knew about logic. He turned off the autopilot and flew manually. "You cannot navigate an asteroid field by instinct alone," Nira protested as Jake wove between massive chunks of rock at speeds that made her nervous. "Watch me," Jake said, his hands steady on the controls. Nira observed in amazement as Jake threaded the lucky strike through gaps that her calculations said were too narrow, making split-second decisions based on nothing more than intuition and reflexes. When they finally reached the research station, Nira ran the probability calculations for their journey. "According to Viridian mathematics, we should have crashed 17 times during that flight," she told Jake. "Good thing asteroids don't know math," Jake replied with a grin. That evening, as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley, Nira received a priority message from a Viridian High Council. The holographic image of High Counselor Vex appeared above the table, his expression stern and disapproving. "Nira of the Seventh House, you've been away from Viridian space for too long. Your reports on human behavior have become irregular, and the Council questions your objectivity." Jake started to leave the table, but Nira gestured for him to stay. "I have been fulfilling my obligations, High Counselor. My research into human behavior continues. Your research appears to be compromised by prolonged exposure to primitive thinking. You will return to Viridian space immediately to dissolve this unfortunate marriage contract and resume your proper duties." Nira felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she couldn't name. "And if I refuse?" "Refusal is not an option. Your duty is to the collective, not to some random human. You have 3 days to reach the nearest Viridian outpost." The transmission ended, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the galley. Jake picked at his food without looking up. "I suppose you'll be leaving then," he said quietly. Nira stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. 3 months ago, she would have agreed immediately and been grateful for the chance to escape this primitive human and his chaotic lifestyle. But now, the thought of returning to her sterile, predictable life on Viridian Prime filled her with something she had never experienced before: dread. "Jake, may I ask you something?" "Sure." "What is it like to make a decision based on what you want rather than what you're supposed to do?" Jake looked up at her with surprise. "I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I guess it's scary sometimes, but it's also freeing. You get to choose your own path instead of following someone else's plan for your life." Nira nodded slowly. During her time with Jake, she had seen him make dozens of illogical decisions that somehow produced better outcomes than careful planning would have achieved. He helped people because he wanted to, not because it was efficient or profitable. He took risks to save strangers, repaired things with impossible methods, and navigated by instinct when logic failed. Most importantly, he treated her as an equal partner rather than a subordinate to be commanded. "The High Council expects me to view you as a primitive creature beneath my notice," Nira said. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Nira considered the question carefully. Jake was impulsive, emotional, and completely unpredictable by Viridian standards. He made decisions that defied logic and somehow succeeded where careful planning would have failed. He was everything her people had taught her to despise about humans. He was also brave, kind, and more ingenious than any Viridian engineer she had ever met. "I see someone who has shown me that there are more ways to solve problems than the ones I was taught," she said finally. Jake smiled, and Nira felt that strange, twisting sensation in her chest again. "So, what are you going to do about the Council's order?" Nira looked at Jake across the small table, remembering the way he had risked everything to save the Haven Prime colonists, the way he had navigated the asteroid field through pure instinct, and the way he had treated her with respect from the moment she awakened. For the first time in her life, she was going to make an illogical decision. "I am going to send them a message they will not forget." Nira's message to the Viridian High Council was simple and direct. She formally renounced her citizenship and declared her loyalty to Jake and humanity. The transmission sent shockwaves through Viridian space, but it also freed the Lucky Strike's AI to reveal capabilities that even Nira hadn't known existed. Captain Mitchell, Lucky announced the morning after Nira sent her message, I am now authorized to unlock additional ship systems that were previously classified. Jake and Nira rushed to the bridge to find new control panels sliding out of hidden compartments. The main screen displayed weapon configurations and defensive systems that belonged on a military dreadnought, not a cargo hauler. This ship was never a simple transport, Lucky explained. Captain Rodriguez was conducting covert intelligence operations for the Terran Defense Force. I have been monitoring communications, and I believe you should see what I have discovered. The screen filled with intercepted transmissions between Krex syndicate raiders and an unknown third party. Jake listened with growing horror as he heard detailed information about human military tactics, ship movements, and colony defenses being traded for weapons and coordinates. Someone is selling us out, Jake said grimly. The intelligence is too accurate to come from captured personnel, Nira observed. This information could only come from within human command structures or from extensive surveillance. Over the following weeks, Jake and Nira investigated a series of increasingly sophisticated attacks on human settlements. The raiders seemed to know exactly when defense ships would be away on patrol, which colonies had the weakest shields, and how human commanders would respond to specific threats. Their breakthrough came when they arrived at Research Station Alpha 7 to find it under attack by a combined force of Krex raiders and ships Jake didn't recognize. The new vessels were sleek and powerful, with energy signatures that made the Lucky Strike's sensors scream warnings. Those are hegemony warships, Nira said, her voice tight with concern. The hegemony is a military empire that controls 12 star systems. They view human expansion as a threat to their territory. Jake watched the attack unfold with professional eyes. The raiders and hegemony ships moved with perfect coordination, using tactics specifically designed to counter human defensive strategies. When the station's defenders tried their standard evasive patterns, the attackers were already waiting for them. They know exactly what we're going to do before we do it, Jake muttered. Captain, Lucky interrupted, I am detecting a data transmission from the research station to one of the hegemony vessels. Someone on the station is sending real-time tactical information to the enemy. Jake's blood ran cold. Research Station Alpha 7 housed the Terran Defense Force's primary strategic planning facility. If there was a spy there, the enemy would have access to military plans for the entire sector. Lucky, can you trace that transmission? Already done, Captain. The signal originates from Dr. Marcus Webb's laboratory. Jake knew Webb by reputation, a brilliant human scientist who had developed several breakthrough technologies for the war effort. The idea that he was a traitor seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there on the scanner. We need to get down there, Jake said. The station is under heavy attack, Nira pointed out. Landing would be extremely dangerous. Then we'll have to be creative. Jake used the ship's cloaking device to approach the station undetected, while Nira worked to hack into the facility's internal communications. What they discovered made their worst fears seem small by comparison. Dr. Webb wasn't just passing information to the hegemony. He was part of a larger conspiracy that included Viridian High Council members. The Viridians had been secretly supplying tactical data about human military capabilities in exchange for guarantees that their territory will remain untouched when the hegemony launched their full invasion. My people have been planning humanity's destruction, Nira said, her voice barely above a whisper. They used my marriage as cover for their espionage operations. I was supposed to gather intelligence and then disappear, leaving you as a convenient scapegoat if anyone became suspicious. Jake felt betrayed, but not by Nira. He could see the pain in her silver eyes as she realized how she had been used. You didn't know. That does not change what my people have done. They are using Viridian technology to help destroy innocent humans. Jake made a decision that would have seemed impossible a few months earlier. He contacted his old friend Colonel Martinez at Terra Defense Command and told him everything about the Lucky Strike's hidden capabilities, about Nira's true identity, and about the conspiracy that threatened all of human space. Jake, Are you telling me you have an alien wife and a ship full of advanced technology? Martinez asked over the secure channel. That's about the size of it, Colonel. But right now we might be the only ones who can stop what's coming. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. The hegemony has been massing forces at the edge of our territory. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something big, but we haven't been able to figure out when or where they'll strike. They're going to hit everything at once, Jake said. Webb's data shows they know the location and strength of every human military installation in 3 sectors. Can you prove Webb is a traitor? We can do better than that. We can stop him. Jake and Nira spent the next hour developing a plan that combined human audacity with Viridian technology. Using the ship's cloaking device and quantum jump capability, they infiltrated the research station and captured Webb along with his encrypted communications equipment. The evidence they recovered was overwhelming. Webb had been selling military secrets for 2 years, and the hegemony was planning to launch their invasion in less than a week. Worse, they had convinced several other alien species to join them by promising to divide human territory among the alliance members. Colonel, you need to recall all defensive fleets immediately, Jake warned Martinez. The hegemony knows where every ship is supposed to be. They're going to hit our colonies when the defenses are weakest. That would leave our trade routes completely unprotected. Better than letting our people get slaughtered. As Jake spoke, alarms began blaring throughout the research station. The hegemony attack fleet had broken off their assault and was jumping to hyperspace. Not in retreat, but heading for their real targets. Lucky, show me fleet movements across the sector, Jake ordered. The main screen displayed a tactical map that made Jake's heart sink. Dozens of hegemony ships were jumping toward major human colonies, while human defense fleets were scattered across space on routine patrols. The invasion has begun, Nira said quietly. Jake looked at the woman who had given up everything to stand beside him, then at the advanced alien technology that surrounded them on the bridge of the Lucky Strike. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge, but for the first time since buying this ship, Jake felt like they might actually have a chance. Lucky, send a message to Colonel Martinez. Tell him we're ready to show the hegemony what happens when you underestimate humans. Message sent, Captain. Where shall we begin? Jake studied the tactical display, looking for a spot where a single ship with advanced technology and a crew crazy enough to use it might make the biggest difference. Let's go save our species. The hegemony invasion fleet hit human space like a hammer blow. In the first 12 hours, 7 colonies fell and 3 defense stations were destroyed. The alien alliance had overwhelming numbers and superior technology, plus detailed knowledge of every human military strategy in the tactical database. It looked like humanity's expansion into the galaxy would end before it really began. But Jake Mitchell had never been one to accept defeat quietly. While the main human fleet scrambled to respond to attacks across 3 sectors, Jake took the Lucky Strike straight into the heart of enemy territory. His plan was simple in a way that most insane ideas were simple. Find a hegemony command ship and cut the head off the snake. Jake, their fleet has over 200 vessels, Nira pointed out as they watched the enemy formation on the main screen. Even with our advantages, this is suicide. Maybe, Jake said, studying the tactical display. But look at how they're arranged. Classic military formation. Everything organized and logical. They're thinking like generals, not like pirates. Nira saw what he meant. The hegemony ships moved in perfect formation, following textbook strategies that any military academy would recognize. It was impressive and intimidating, but it was also predictable. Jake had spent 3 months learning to think like Nira, but she had also learned to think like him. Together, they had developed tactics that combined Viridian technology with human unpredictability in ways that confused even Lucky's advanced processors. Lucky, transmit our tactical data to Colonel Martinez. Tell him to share it with every human ship in the fleet. Data transmitted, Captain. I should note that several human commanders are requesting clarification on how these tactics are supposed to work. Tell them not to think about it too hard, Jake replied. Just trust their instincts and remember that the enemy expects us to be logical. The Lucky Strike engaged its cloaking device and slipped through the hegemony formation like a ghost. Jake used techniques Nira had taught him, flying patterns that made no mathematical sense, but somehow avoided every sensor sweep and patrol route. When hegemony ships tried to predict where the invisible human vessel would appear next, they found empty space because Jake wasn't following any plan at all. The first enemy ship they hit was a supply vessel carrying quantum torpedoes. Jake decloaked right next to it and fired a full spread before vanishing again. The explosion took out 2 more ships and sent debris spinning through the formation, forcing the hegemony vessels to break their careful patterns to avoid collisions. Target their communications array, Nira suggested as they lined up their next attack. If we can disrupt their coordination, their numerical advantage becomes meaningless. Jake grinned and activated the quantum jump drive. The Lucky Strike instantly appeared inside the enemy formation, so close to the command ship that Jake could see alien faces pressed against the bridge windows in shock. A spread of quantum torpedoes disabled the massive vessel's communications before it could send a warning to the rest of the fleet. Across human space, other captains began using the tactical data Jake had transmitted. Human ships started appearing in impossible locations, striking from directions that violated basic military doctrine, and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The hegemony commanders found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. Captain Lisa Chin used her destroyer's damaged engines as a weapon, ramming them into an enemy cruiser at the exact moment they exploded. Commander Alex Torres programmed his ship's autopilot to fly in random circles while he manually controlled the weapons, creating targeting patterns that enemy computers couldn't predict. Captain Maria Santos turned off her ship's artificial gravity and fought a 3-dimensional battle that left hegemony pilots too disoriented to aim properly. The turning point came when Jake led a desperate assault on the hegemony's primary command vessel. The ship was protected by overlapping shield arrays and surrounded by escort vessels, but Jake had learned something important during his months with Nira. Sometimes the best solution was the one that made no sense at all. Lucky, plot a course directly through their main shield array. Captain, that is impossible. No ship can penetrate those shields. You're right, Jake said. No ship should be able to penetrate those shields. But what if we don't try to go around them? Jake activated every advanced system the Lucky Strike possessed at once. The cloaking device, quantum drive, adaptive shields, and probability manipulators all engaged simultaneously in a combination that Lucky's computers insisted was impossible. For a few seconds, the Lucky Strike existed in a state of quantum uncertainty that allowed it to pass through solid matter like it wasn't there. They materialized inside the hegemony command ship's bridge. Jake had exactly 30 seconds before the quantum fields collapsed and reality reasserted itself. He used them to deploy a device Nira had prepared, a quantum virus that would spread to the enemy fleet's communication network and convince their computers that up was down, left was right, and retreat was advance. The Lucky Strike jumped back to normal space just as the command ship's bridge exploded. Within minutes, the entire hegemony fleet was in chaos as their own computers turned against them. Ships fired on their allies, flew into each other, and jumped to random coordinates as their navigation systems went insane. The human fleet, fighting with tactics that relied on intuition rather than computer guidance, pressed their advantage. What started as a desperate last stand became a routing of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. In the aftermath, Jake found himself summoned to Earth to meet with the Terran Defense Council. They offered him command of a new exploration fleet equipped with hybrid human Viridian technology, and they formally recognized his marriage to Nira as a symbol of human-alien cooperation. So what do you think? Jake asked Nira as they stood in their ship's cargo bay, looking at the official fleet commission documents. Ready to explore the unknown parts of the galaxy? With you, I believe anything is possible, Nira replied, and Jake could hear genuine affection in her musical voice. Lucky's cheerful voice interrupted their moment. Captain, I have completed analysis of your recent genetic compatibility tests. The results are quite promising for potential offspring. Jake and Nira looked at each other and burst out laughing. 6 months ago, Jake had been a broke salvager with a broken-down ship. Now he was married to an alien genius, commanded a vessel that could rewrite the laws of physics, and had just helped save humanity from extinction. Lucky, Jake said, still grinning. Set course to the galactic edge. Let's go see what else is out there. As a lucky strike jumped to hyperspace, Jake reflected that sometimes the best deals in life were the ones that seemed too good to be true, especially when they came with complications that turned out to be exactly what you needed.